Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It has been 3 weeks with laryngitis, and even though I feel a lot better, I still sound pretty bad. So this week I am letting my voice rest again, and I put together a compilation of some summer-inspired recipes for you. These are some of our family favorites for summertime, especially because a lot of the ingredients come straight from our garden. So hopefully next week I will be able to put out a regular video and sound better. I know you don't want to listen to this for 15 or 20 minutes. So without further ado, let's get into these recipes and back into the good old days where I had a voice.
So I think I mentioned recently on a YouTube video about how we have not historically had a lot of luck with zucchini in our garden, but this year I switched up the variety of zucchini that I'm growing. I switched to Dunja, Green Machine, and Golden Glory, and we are getting a lot of zucchini, plenty for our family of 3. And one of my all-time favorite ways to make zucchini is turning them into loaded zucchini boats. So they're kind of like a loaded potato skin, but using zucchini instead of a potato. And what I like about this recipe is I can use some of the leftover parts for the recipe I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes. So what I'm doing first then is I am cooking bacon and rendering out all the fat. I'm not using the fat for this recipe. I'll use it in a little bit, but I'm cooking that bacon until it's nice and crispy and then just setting it aside. In the meantime, I am just chopping up the zucchini. Now, some of our zucchini are huge. So some of them I cut lengthwise and then crossways, and the others I just cut lengthwise and scooping out the center flesh of them. Now, to scoop that out, I find that a grapefruit spoon works really well. And then once I get all that center flesh taken out, I'm just setting it aside to use in a little bit for another dinner recipe. Really, you can stuff these with anything you want. I've seen these with rice and even with meat. I'm just using a little bit of cheese and some bacon and then just some garnish on top. So here I'm just shredding up a little bit of cheddar cheese, and then I am seasoning the zucchini and baking them. So here's my secret weapon again: freeze-dried onion powder, a little bit of paprika, salt, and pepper. Again, you really can't go wrong here. Just use your favorite spices to flavor them. Meanwhile, I also have my baking stone in the oven preheating. I find that when I put vegetables on a nice hot baking sheet, they just cook a little bit better. They have a more even cook to them, and they actually just cook a little faster. So these just go in the oven then at 400 for about 10 minutes until they are tender enough to pierce with a fork. While that is in the oven, I am out in the garden just finding some herbs that will pair nicely with cheese and bacon on a loaded zucchini boat. Now, the type of herbs that you would use really depends on what you're stuffing it with, but in this case, I use chives and parsley, and honestly, I don't think you can ever really go wrong with chives and parsley on just about anything. I've said this a lot on YouTube over the last few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, that if you want to start growing your own food, a really great and easy way to do that is with herbs. They are so simple to grow and they add so much flavor to your food. After about 10 minutes, I'm now loading up the zucchini with some shredded cheese and then putting them back into the oven until the cheese is melted. It only takes about 5 minutes or so. And then once they are ready, I load them up with all the things you would want on a loaded zucchini boat. Some chopped up bacon. I have a little bit of ranch that I added gorgonzola to. I actually showed this on one of my clean out meal videos recently. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. But I added a little gorgonzola to the ranch, put that on there, and the fresh herbs. And this is one of our favorite early summer meals. It's great for an appetizer, but also if you serve it with a salad, for example, it can make a delicious full meal. These are canned peaches, and the peaches came from South Carolina because in these parts, South Carolina peaches rain. And I just drained the juice and I'm letting a little bit of sugar sit on them to create a syrup. You could definitely use fresh peaches or even thawed frozen peaches to do this. Once that liquid gets nice and syrupy, I'm just straining them and separating it out and then putting the peaches and the syrup in the fridge while I make the rest of the custard. Custard is a major nostalgic food for me. When I was young, my dad and I would ride our bikes along the C&O Canal in Maryland, and there was this little custard stand, and we would go get custard and then ride our bikes back. So this flavor is really sweet and nostalgic for me. But what makes custard custard and not ice cream is that it has egg in it. So these are sweetened egg yolks. I'm tempering them before pouring all of the yolks into a milk, cream, and sugar mixture. And then once I get the egg yolks in there, I'm just heating all of it to about 170 degrees. Then I'm adding in vanilla and the peach juice and putting it in my ice cream maker. So this is the Kumio ice cream maker. I have a full review about this on YouTube. I'll leave the link for that in the description box below. But this thing is awesome because you just put your ingredients or your mixture right in, hit go, and you have ice cream in 45 to 60 minutes. There's no pre-freezing, no salt, no ice. It's super easy. When I took the custard out of the machine, it seemed a little watery, but I mixed in the peaches and transferred the custard into little ice cream containers and froze it, and it turned into the most beautiful and delicious custard I think I've ever had. In the meantime, I am out in the garden grabbing some vegetables for a cucumber salad. So my tomato garden is a bit of a success and a bit of a failure. We have tomatoes, but we also have some serious bug infestation, and it is also blazing hot, so the fruit has stopped setting. But I'm going to use what I can right out of my garden for a lemony cucumber salad with creamy dressing. This recipe is actually over on my blog over at moonandmagnolia.com. This is a pretty classic lemony dressing with olive oil, Greek yogurt, lemon zest, but the star is actually, I think, the fresh herbs. So I'm using basil and chives from my garden, and I'm chopping them finely and mixing them in. Now, if you don't have fresh herbs, you can always use 1/3 of the amount of dried herbs. But if we are talking about crafting summer flavors in the kitchen, fresh herbs are definitely the way to go. And then I am making a beautiful summer salad with cucumbers and tomatoes from our garden, red onion, feta cheese, and chickpeas. Now here's the deal about my tomato garden. It's a little bit of a mess, and I actually had to pull out almost all of my tomatoes before they were ripened. But honestly, I live in southeastern North Carolina, and we love nothing more than a fried green tomato here, so the more green tomatoes I have, the better. This is probably my #1 favorite summer food, and I'm going to share with you how to make sourdough fried green tomatoes. You will need sourdough breadcrumbs. I have a number of YouTube videos where I made breadcrumbs and a blog with a full recipe. I'll leave those links in the description box below. But the real secret to a fried green tomato is, 1, don't cut the tomato too thick. You can see here it is just sort of a nice even thickness, maybe about 1/4 inch thick. 2, fry them in coconut oil. I'm telling you, those are the secret ingredients. I am simply just taking the sliced tomatoes, dredging it in flour, egg, and sourdough breadcrumbs. Each of those are seasoned individually with salt and pepper. That's pretty key also. I do these in small batches of about 4 to 5, and I fry them in coconut oil for maybe 2 to 3 minutes on each side or until they are golden. Last year, I was watching a gardening show on YouTube, and the gardener who lives on the other side of the country was really upset because a bunch of her tomatoes fell off of her plant before they ripened. So she was going to feed her green tomatoes to her chickens, and I about died. Your green tomatoes will also ripen on the counter, but I recommend frying them. You can find a red tomato anywhere, but you can really only find a good green tomato in your garden. First up on the summer sourdough discard dessert menu is sourdough lemon bars. And I will say we liked all of these desserts, but the lemon bars may have actually been our favorite as a family. So what's really cool about these lemon bars is that the thickener for the lemon filling is the sourdough discard. So what's important to note about that then, for this discard recipe, you will need to use active sourdough starter. I have a full YouTube video about the difference between active sourdough starter, inactive, and discard. I'll link that in the description box below, but essentially discard is just starter that you are taking out of the jar and putting somewhere else. And in this case, I'm putting it in lemon bars. So for the lemon bars, this is a shortbread sourdough cookie crust that I am just mixing in my stand mixer. This recipe will be on my blog soon, but while you wait for that, this is just a combination of about a stick of butter and a third of a cup of granulated sugar, and I am creaming them together in the stand mixer. And once the butter and the sugar is combined and nice and fluffy, I'm adding in about a quarter cup of sourdough discard, a little bit of vanilla extract, some salt, and all-purpose flour, just to make a really simple shortbread dough. What's nice about this is that dough only takes a minute or two to combine in the mixer. You definitely don't want to overmix it. And then you simply just put it in a parchment lined baking dish and just use your hands and mash it down into an even layer. And then I poked it with the fork just to prevent any big puffing up of the cookie crust. And then you pop it in the oven until the edges are just beginning to brown. For me, that took about 35 minutes. And while that's baking, I am getting the sourdough lemon filling prepared. So as I mentioned, what's really important about this recipe is you need active discard. So you can see as I'm pouring in the discard here in just a moment on the video, it's really thick and bubbly. One way you can tell the difference between active and inactive discard is the consistency and the texture. And this is really thick. You can see it's kind of gloopy and sticking together and has a lot of bubbles. Sourdough discard can be a little tricky to mix into the ingredients sometimes, so it definitely helps to work with the emulsifiers first. So in this case, I mix the eggs and the sugar together, and then I put the sourdough discard in because that egg just helps it combine a little bit better. What sets this recipe apart from others is that active starter that you use as the thickening agent, and also the fresh lemons. A lot of lemon bar recipes, and definitely like store-bought lemon bars, use lemon extract, but this uses fresh lemon zest and fresh lemon juice, which makes for a really beautiful and light lemon flavor. Once everything is combined, I am just pouring it onto that cookie crust and putting it right into the oven. You can see it seems a little thin and watery. That's okay. Just make sure you get it right into the oven and it will start to firm up as it bakes. I baked the lemon bars at 325 for about 40 minutes until the center was just a tiny bit wobbly. It's okay if it jiggles a little bit, that'll firm up as it cools. Then I let these cool to room temperature and refrigerated them for about 2 hours, and they were so good. That thick cookie crust with the lightly sweetened bright lemon is so perfect for summer. You could definitely sprinkle these with powdered sugar, but we ate these as is and loved them. So I am making a sourdough Dutch baby pancake. I have made a number of Dutch babies in the past, and I found that almost every Dutch baby recipe, whether it's sourdough or not, is just about the same. But one of the things that I don't like about Dutch babies is once all the fun magic of the bubbles begin to deflate, it's just this thin crepe-like thing. And I like crepes, but I just want something more substantial. So I made this recipe a little bit different so that it has the flavor of the Dutch baby, but it's a little bit thicker like an actual pancake. So I just simply washed and sliced up some fresh strawberries and washed blueberries, and now I am mixing together the Dutch baby pancake ingredients. In a large bowl, I'm mixing together melted butter, some whole milk. The milk should really be room temperature. Mine was still a little bit too cool and it kind of messed up my melted butter. So try to let yours get down to room temperature because it will work better. And then with that, I am also combining sourdough starter. So you can use active or inactive sourdough discard because this doesn't rely on the discard for leavening. In fact, there is no leavening at all in this recipe. So feel free to use whatever you have on hand. If it's been a minute since you fed your starter, it might be a little more sour. So if that's not what you're going for, then I would plan to feed your starter the day before and then use that discard the next day. But either way, it will be fine. Now I'm also adding in some fresh eggs. And to mix these in, I really like to use my Danish dough whisk. So they are really made for thick ingredients. And I tried a regular whisk at first and all my ingredients got stuck in there. So I do recommend a Danish dough whisk for this or a fork. Now I'm mixing in some vanilla and a little bit of salt and giving it a whirl. And then I'm getting a 9-inch cast iron skillet preheated and putting some butter in it. And this is what makes it more of a pancake than a traditional Dutch baby. The big skillets will leave a lot of room for that batter to spread and then to bubble up and rise. But when you use a smaller skillet, it's a little bit thicker and it doesn't quite bubble up as much. And I think personally, it might not make for quite such a fancy Dutch baby pancake, but it makes for a better one. So the other thing about a Dutch baby pancake is you need a lot of butter in that pan. So put a couple tablespoons of butter in there, swirl it around. You can even pop it in the oven to brown and then add your batter and bake it for about 25 minutes. Because this is thicker, it took a little bit longer, so I would count on about 25 to 30 minutes if you're using a 9-inch skillet. Then I'm simply going to top this with those beautiful spring berries, a little bit of fresh lemon juice, powdered sugar, and maple syrup. This pairs really nicely with the breakfast salad. However, this is also really good on its own. So if you're not having brunch, if you're like, I'm just making this for my family like I did, I in fact was not making brunch this day, you can make this and it is a great filling breakfast for your family. Those eggs add a lot of protein, so this is a really great meal in lieu of a regular pancake. Late summer marks the beginning of the harvest for many people. Now, in these parts, we have been harvesting food from gardens and getting food from local farms for quite a while now, but I am trying to harvest and preserve whatever I can from my garden right now so we can enjoy it later. And one of my absolute favorite things to preserve from the garden is basil, particularly homemade pesto. And this is really nice because whether or not you have a huge garden, a homestead, or just a small pot of basil, you can preserve pesto at home to enjoy all year. Last year and this year, I made walnut pesto because pine nuts are so expensive. So I just get a big bag of walnuts at Costco or Sam's. To make this particular recipe, I am putting 2 cups of fresh basil from the garden in a food processor. I'm also adding in about 2 cloves of garlic. This garlic is from my garden and some of it grew really well and some was small. So I'm using up the small garlic cloves first. And then 1/3 of a cup of walnuts. And then I'm pulsing that in the food processor just until it's a little chunky. And then I'm adding in about 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese and 1/2 cup of olive oil. You can add more or less olive oil depending on what type of consistency you want. I prefer mine a little bit chunky, and you can always add more oil to your dish whenever you are using the pesto, so I don't worry about that too much at this point. Basil is the gift that keeps on giving in a garden. My friend and I were just talking about how all of our tomatoes died this summer and everything has been a mess in our gardens, but the basil, it is going strong. So if you are thinking about starting a garden next year, I really recommend growing basil, if nothing else, because it's so easy. And then come midwinter, when it's cold and it's hard to get fresh, really beautiful food, you have some stowed away in your freezer and you can have fresh pesto. To capture this late summer flavor, I like to freeze individual portions of pesto. So this is enough for one dinner, and I have 4 bags that I am putting inside of a larger freezer bag, and I like to label it with what came from the garden so that way in February I know what was from our harvests.
Thanks so much for stopping by today, and hopefully the next time we see each other, I will have a voice.